Hi, my name's Keith Cooper from Northlight Images, and as you can probably guess from all of this stuff, today I'm looking at printing, printer profiles, paper types. What in particular am I looking at? Well, underneath this pile of papers here is the Epson ET-8550, got for our office last year. Borrowed it from Karen's office again for a short while, and I'm making some profiles and testing papers. What particular papers? Because surely I've covered lots. Well, I looked at the papers that I originally covered in the review and various other things where I've made paper profiles. And I realised that, and this goes for quite a lot of my printer reviews actually, I've somewhat lacked coverage of matte photo papers. Now there's a whole load of them, and right up front I've got a big range of profiles I've created from all this lot here, which are as ever available on request. I just ask for a coffee donation for them if you find them useful. I'll go through details of the papers, because whilst nominally they're all the same sort of paper with different settings, they're from different makes, and they include various ones, including a Canon paper. And out of interest, I'd note that the Canon Matte Photo paper that I'm testing here gave some of the best results. Now, when I say best results, you have to take that with a bit of a pinch of salt, because in playing around with media settings and various things and all the profiles I've got, some profiles will work better than others. Now, there's some very counterintuitive things, including the fact that although all these are typically, and here's a paper, Epson Archival Matte. Now that's one of the papers that I looked at, and I have to look at my notes here because they're all very similar. That's 192 GSM paper. These are all subtly different. They feel a bit different. Some of them are smoother than others. The Archival Matte has a fractionally more surface texture. Some of them feel very slightly rough. Some of them feel... There's lots of differences between them, but the Canon PM101, which is one of their basic matte photo papers, actually performs really well with the profiles here. And although there is an Epson matte media setting, I'm going to show with some details here, and I'm not going to go into too much techie stuff, but just enough to give you some ideas, that using the VFA media setting, because it uses the Pigment Black ink as well as all the other blacks on most of these papers, but not all, gives better results. Now these are better results that even if you look at the profiles I've created, and I say there are a whole load of these profiles, even if you look at these profiles, you might just look at, and this is a Gamut display, this is using the Max, on the PowerBook here, sorry, not a PowerBook, it's a MacBook Pro. PowerBook sitting over there. Yeah. That is using the Mac Color Sync utility and gives you an idea of what a profile space looks like. That could be very misleading, as I've come back to and show why, and I've covered this in videos before. Gamut is not everything. In fact, it's vastly overrated as a way of going between papers. If I was to do a straightforward review in the style of many so-called paper reviewers that end up with tables of data that include things like Gamut volumes, one of the worst performing papers here would actually have, after I profiled it, the largest Gamut volume. It tells you that it's not this shape, and if I move it round here, you can see it's a 3D shape. It is not. That is a boundary condition. It's what goes on inside that shape that makes the difference, because that is where most of your image lies. So it really is, when people say, oh, this paper has a Gamut volume of 876,000 and this one is only 790,000, so this one must be better. No, that is frequently complete nonsense. And that's why I have got software I can get numbers out of for this, but I never put these numbers into reviews, because without an awful lot of context and explanation, they are utterly meaningless. What I'm interested in is can you make great prints? Now, the test image I've got here, this is the test image that I use quite often, this top one here. That's available on the Northlight Images website for download. Check the links for all the stuff with this. I've got loads of things about these test images. This is one of my own images that I use for testing. Now, this particular building, it was lit at night. There's floodlighting. There's very bright colours. This is an image which can cause issues. Now, if you've read my original written review of this, the 8550, and this goes for the 8500 as well, which is just smaller. If you've read that, you'll see that the key is understanding how the VFA media setting works and how that not all papers behave the same. Now, I said these are all similar papers, and I've got boxes of them around here. I've tested lots of different, there's the profiling targets at the top here. I create those, I'm using an i1 ICC spectrophotometer for it. This is X-Right's i1 profiler software. Now this is a measured set of measurements from one of these, but I'll come back to some of these details in a moment. But let's take a typical paper. There we go, that's Epson Archival Matte. Yeah. Okay, you think, well, that's an Epson paper, Epson matte paper. I'd use the Epson matte settings. Sounds reasonable. And if you look at the Gamut volumes, and this is where I'll just have a look over here, you can see, and this is the profile that I've created, being looked at on some of the software on here, the Matte Color Sync utility. Now, there is the Gamut volume, and that is for Epson Archival Matte, using the Epson matte media setting. Remember, you have a profile and a media setting. The quality setting may make a little bit of difference, but in general not. The two important ones are the profile for the paper and the media setting. The two go together. In fact, you need to know the media setting when you're making a profile. And in my profiles that I create, the names have the settings in the name of the profile as a hint to remind it, because I'll never remember otherwise. So anyway, there we are. We've got this nice, big lumpy space. That looks reasonable. Lots down the bottom there. Looks like a nice big gamut. And in fact, if I go to the VFA version, we can see it's smaller. And this is that bit I said about gamut volumes. There we go. Look, it's decidedly different shape. Light at the top, dark at the bottom. But if I go to that, well, you can see it's bigger. In fact, if I look down on top of it, you see it's a different shape. Not necessarily, yes, it's a bit bigger there, but it's a different shape. Now, as I said, these things can be, they're pretty diagrams. That's why people include them in reviews and things. And I always put one or two in just because it's expected. But here we have two prints made using, and I come back to the importance of rendering intents in a bit when I've looked at a few more of these, but the rendering intents do matter. But these are done with fairly simple relative colorimetric rendering intent with black point correction. Now you need black point correction with matte papers like this, because otherwise you can get blocked up shadow areas and things. But I've done a video about black point correction and what it means and aspects of that. So there we go. We've got two pictures, two prints, which I'm sure, not knowing how this is going to look on the video until I actually look at it, I can be fairly sure there won't be much difference between these on the video. There might be. Actually, it's just one of those things. Video is utterly useless for trying to show subtleties of colour and tonality and things. I'm sure it can be done properly if I had vastly more experience editing set. But anyway, take it, as far as I'm concerned, video is useless for showing actual subtleties. But between these two, and we've got lighting, I've got lighting is about 4000K. It's all about 4000K here. That's really just because it makes it nice and easy to do the video. It means things on screens match what you see. And I've got a light over here that's set to just over 4000 as well, various others. But if I look at those two, what differences can I see? Well, the black is blacker on this one here. And this is the VFA setting. If I look at the bright colours, well, there's not really that much difference, but the blacker blacks, and this is despite what that diagram looks like, the darker blacks on this are giving a better definition. Certainly this area here where it's got black, dark sky in it. the colours are slightly different as well. Now, this is one of the bits. This is almost out of gamut colours, so you're looking at how strong colours are handled. Some of the test image includes that as well, but you know, have your own image that you like, that you want to test. And always, if you get the profiles and you have a paper, and I've tested so many profiles so that it is very likely that if you have a matte photo paper, and the usual thing is, you know, they're described that way somehow. They can be varying weights. The ones I've tested range between 120 gram, which really is quite thin, up to 280 gram. So quite a range of papers, but they're all described as matte photo papers. They tend to have a smooth finish, and they're white. Some are whiter than the others. This Epson Archival matte is not quite such a brilliant white as most of the others, but you would think when you print these, they're all much of a muchness. Now, I've tested enough here that I would hope that almost any paper that you've got, and I appreciate people different parts of the world won't have this set of papers. I can't even guarantee that all of them are still available here in the UK anymore. But I've tested enough of a range of papers, and I have created profiles at the Epson matte media setting and the VFA media setting. You will need to do some experimenting if you're using a third-party paper. But of course, one of the nice things about the 8550, and that's why I happily recommend it to people, is it's an ink tank printer, and the inks are relatively cheap. You don't have to print, and I printed these on A3 and A3 plus sheets, you don't have to print big prints like this to test it. You can do your testing on a sheet like this, cut up into small bits and things to save on the paper. But you really do need to decide on your images. Have a look. The test images help, but occasionally one or two of your own images. But always, for basic yes/no testing, I'll always use a known test image like this. But this is the sort of stuff that's in the written review. I've got lots of details on that. And it does cover some of these aspects about the VFA ink use and why that's important about getting the best out of the printer. But looking at these two, the Epson Archival matte, the best looking print in this light, with light reflecting off it slightly, and that varies as well with surface texture and things, is actually this one, and that is the VFA media setting. So not what you would have thought. Now, I have done some other Epson papers. I did Epson Enhanced Matte, and I also did Canon Fine Art Photo Matte. That's the FAPM1. It turns out the Epson Enhanced Matte, I hadn't got much of that, and I'd only got A4 of it, so I've done a VFA setting. You can actually, Epson produce their own profile using the Epson Mattes setting, obviously. So I have got, for experiment purposes, if you want to try that of a profile made for the VFA setting, I've got one of those as well. So anyway, there we go. Here's another one. Now, this one is an Olmec paper. Now, Olmec is a brand that goes back in the UK quite a while. It's connected with Innova. Now, Innova make paper. One of the nice things about testing papers by Innova, apart from they make nice papers, is that they sell papers to people all over the place, which appear under their own brand names. So look at the details of what I've got here in terms of the weights and things like that. And I'll put more details in the notes to the video so you can follow that through. But Innova papers may appear under other names. This particular Olmec one, which now is a photo matte archival. It's listed as archival. And it is a, once again, check the weight. This is a 230 gram paper. So yeah, not a bad paper at all. Now, this one's interesting. I'm just going to go to the settings here and have a look at this and load this one up. Now, once again, I've loaded up this particular shape here. This is the Epson matte media setting. Yeah, nice, good looking shape, whatever. And if I go to the VFA version of it, we can see it shrinks slightly. Now, it doesn't shrink as much as the Epson Archival matte that I showed the example of a while ago, but it does shrink. And if we look at the top-down view of it, if I look at that one, that's with the VFA setting, and then if I change it to the Epson matte setting, whoa, it's quite a bit bigger. it looks like the Epson matte setting here covers quite a lot more colours. So how did they print? Well, in this one, and I'm hoping you can actually see some of the difference here, we have got, and this is using relative colorimetric, we have got a distinctly different set of colours here. We're getting some purples showing through here, whereas in this one they're coming through as blue. Now the other colours look okay. The print is also quite a bit lighter looking than the VFA setting. There's quite a difference there between the two, between Epson Matte, VFA. The black is better with the VFA, as I'd forget, but as I'd expect. But in terms of the colours, there's quite a difference here. Now, I mentioned rendering intents earlier. Now, choosing your rendering intent, it helps if you've got soft proofing to explore this. So I'm just printing these using Epson Print Layout. So I've just got relative colorimetric and perceptual rendering intents. Now, perceptual looks quite different to this. Perceptual on this one looks a bit different. This really is quite different. And in fact, of all these papers, the biggest difference between the VFA and the Epson matte setting was with this particular paper. Now, this is an Olmec 230 gram paper. It's listed as an archival. I'm sure this is produced under many other names, you will find it, but we've got quite a distinct difference here. Now, it may be that you have an image, and this is, if we look at this bit here, we've got this little bump here, and it's in the purplish blue region, which is exactly where these colours. So, whereas this instantly stands apart from some of the others, is this more accurate? Or does that one look better? Now, to me, there's quite a difference between them. There's also subtle difference in detail here. It's all about how the colours are handled, but do experiment with rendering intents as well for particular images. You may find that for your images, perceptual rendering intent works better as well. Now, you don't need, with perceptual rendering intent, you don't actually need to apply BPC. A form of BPC is added into the profile when it's built using the profiling software. With relative colorimetric, it does help to check it. If you don't check it, you will get, as I say, blocked up shadows and things like that. But those two are very different. And it is when I look at the shape here, I can see there is a distinct difference in the shape of that. Now, just go back to these and just switch between them again. So that, there we go. I'll just try and emphasize that bit there. So there we got that one. That's the Epson Matte. And if I switch over, oh, boom, we can see quite a bit smaller gamut. Now, it's quite possible, and looking at other ones, that this particular bit of the image here should have more of the purple in it, but not many printers manage that. Now, a big printer like this, Epson P5000 here, and some of the larger format printers, they have quite a range more inks, and they have bigger gamuts, and I would expect to see something here. Which one's it going to look like? I'm not sure. I can't remember. It's been a while since I printed this image on that printer. But you say, well, which is best? Whichever you like the best. Which is correct? Well, for an image like this, whichever looks the best. Now, unless you're replicating artwork where critical colours are involved, this could be a matter of taste. Now, the fact that every single other rendering, every other paper showed this as blue, and it was only that one rendering intent on one paper showed it more of the purple in it, which we've got from here. That suggests there is a difference. Where does this difference come from? It's all about the coatings. Everything you need to know about papers, photo papers and things, about how some papers work well with printers and some papers work poorly with printers, no matter what settings you use. The reason for that is almost always that it's about the coatings. The paper underneath is, well, just the paper underneath. It's the coatings that matter. Now, with these, one of the things I also check with papers, this is a little UV pen light. This is a filtered one, so this is a 365 nanometer. So it's effectively into the UV. You can get ones at 395, which are bluer, but this 365 ones is only a few quid online. This one here, this is rechargeable, will make optical brighteners light up a treat. As we can see, if I put that, and now I'm hoping that, yeah, this is making, what this will show up like on the video, I've no idea. But this is the sort of one that, light like this is the one that they recommend you don't use to look around a hotel room you're visiting and before you've stayed there. It shows up all sorts of things, but they're very useful for showing up brightness. Now, every single one of these papers, even the ones marked archival, have some form of brightening agents in them. So the Epson Archival Matte, yeah, that lights up quite nicely as well. They do behave differently. In fact, the Canon Fine Art Photo Matte FAPM1, that one didn't light up much. So you've got all of these different papers. They all are slightly different, hence all the different ones I've got here and why you might try different stuff with them. With all the caveats and things, would I say any particular papers here were best in terms of performance? Which ones would I think of using myself? Well, actually, the Canon PM101 basic matte paper is probably the most consistent and good looking. That one, there's very little difference between the Epson matte and the VFA settings. In fact, under some lightings I might even give the nod to the Epson matte setting. You'll have to experiment. The other one, and this is another Innova paper, this is the IFA 39. Now this is quite a nice solid paper. Now IFA 39 is 280 grams. I'm sure this will be made for other people as well. In this one, the VFA definitely has the better looking blacks. Colours not that much difference. As I say, it is only the one paper where I noticed big difference in colour range, as I pointed out over there. But yeah, if you wanted, if I was recommending some papers, Innova IFA 39 is good, and the Canon good old PM101, one of their pretty basic papers. So there we go. But as I say, with other stuff, it depends. So just a little bit more detail, going back to that particular, well, some of these ones here. If I actually open up the measurement data from these targets, and these are the profiling targets that I use. There's A4 is split over two of them. You've got all these. This does a range of colours. These are red, and I import them into i1 Profiler here. Now I've loaded here Epson Archival Matte. As I said, there are differences between them. Now I can click on a particular patch here. This is the patch data. And incidentally, if anyone can make use of this patch data, all of these profiles I've made here, I have stored the measurement MXF profile data. So if you want to play around with the measurement data that I've got from this, so assume that you've got software can handle it. If you want to do that, just drop me an email for it, and so I'm happy to make that available as well. I mean, the profiles are what are useful for people, but this is for people who want to just look into stuff like this if you haven't got the kit for it. Now, looking at this particular one here, if I look at a black patch on this, now black, that's whatever black the ink is printed. If I look at this, I get a spectral graph as well. The spectral graph on this is flat. Instantly I know that this is a media that was profiled with the VFA setting, because the VFA setting uses the matte black as well as the photo black and all the colours and the greys and things, whatever, uses the full range of inks. The matte black means that we get a nice good black. If I now load the same paper but with the Epson matte profile, I've got the data here. Did that, and now we get this curve at the bottom here, hockey stick like curve that lifts at the end in the infrared. That is because the pigment black is not being used. One of the issues of dye-based inks is that the blacks have much lower infrared density in them. That means that with this, you just see this curve. It gives a slight brownish tinge to when you look at blacks. If you measure the color of them, I know it's a strange thing to say measure the color of the blacks, but there is some color there. They have a distinctly reddish brownish color because of the infrared reflectance. That is one of the things that makes the difference between them. And this one here, this is the 120 gram. This is a Pinnacle one, Photo Matte 120. This is a bargain photo matte paper. Same coating, but quite a thin paper, 120, so needs handling with a bit of care. But from a print quality point of view, it's excellent. Looking at my list here again, say this one, once again, as before, you get a larger Gamut apparently on the Epson matte, but when you print on here you get a much better look for the blacks, and the better blacks make a better looking picture. Now if you want to print black and white as well, almost all of these papers it is better to use the ABW print mode. That's the black and white print mode. If you're printing from something like Epson print layout, use that. Use the black and white print mode, the ABW mode. Use the VFA setting. You may need to linearize it slightly. You may need to boost your shadows a bit. Remember, that's just created for a particular paper, Velvet Fine Art. It may not be the same with other papers. So whilst the black and white quality is good, using the ABW mode, you do have to be a bit careful of it crunching shadows and things like that, but that will vary from paper to paper, and I haven't tested these for black and white performance, but have a look in the written review. There is loads of information about black and white and paper choices and media setting choices. So I've got these two here, and once again the VFA setting, well, here the difference is less. Whereas on some of the other papers, there was quite a distinct difference I could see in this lighting between the density of the blacks. It's not that much here. Yes, I think for this particular paper, the VFA gets the edge. But here, you might find images where the Epson matte, this is one of those ones where you're going to have to experiment. This, as I say, it's sold as a value paper. So this is a relatively cheap paper. Once again, try the profiles, experiment with settings and find what works. In terms of print quality, the only problem with this is, well, it's very thin, so I can see the image through it from the lighting there. But if you were mounting it to something, that wouldn't really matter. If you're framing it, it wouldn't really matter. Just bear in mind what's behind it if it's a thin paper like this. But that's the differences between them. So I've got, sort of summing up, a whole lot of profiles created for the same papers using the Epson matte and the VFA settings. Superficially, most of them, when you actually look at the profiles, you have bigger gamuts with the Epson matte setting. Well, several of them, certainly for the Archival matte and the Olmec one, the 230 gram. But there are differences between them, so it's worth testing. Most of these, there's not much of a colour difference between them, but occasionally you'll get a paper where there is quite a hefty colour difference depending on the gamut. So there you go. Bit of an outline, lots of paper, and hardly any ink used. Lots of paper, lots of profiles, lots of information there. I hope it helps somebody get better results using papers like this. And as I have neglected papers like this. I had quite a lot of them, and I've sort of avoided, because I've been looking at photo papers, or when I've been doing matte, I've been looking at art papers, heavier cotton rag papers, higher quality papers. If you want to make interesting looking pictures with it, these papers not to be overlooked. Anyway, any questions, let me know. I'll put more notes in more details in the notes, and if you do want the profiles, as I say, just drop me an email, and once again I'll put the links to various stuff, but let me know. Incidentally, if you've had profiles off me before and you made a donation for them, let me know in the email. You can still have them, but as I say, obviously, if anyone wants the full, all all of the profiles, all my other profiles, and there are now 30 odd at least. Well, add this long, we're over 40 profiles now. Let me know, and you're welcome to them. Thanks for watching. I hope that was of interest.